All right, so going here into week 4, or I should say ending off for week 4, taking a look at our winners and losers. So for the first winner of this week, I'm going to say it's Derrick Henry, man. Like the dude finally has started to kind of look like the Derrick Henry of old. You know, he got 114 rushing yards for, and a touchdown. His longest was 19, so he's not quite to that same Derrick Henry that we've seen in years past, but you know what? He was still better. This was his best rushing game so far this year. Highest number of rushing yards, obviously, week before, coming off with 20 attempts against the Raiders for 85 yards, to this week against the Indianapolis Colts, getting himself 22 attempts for 114 yards. So, man, like he he's definitely trending upwards in the right direction and is still a force to be reckoned with. And he went up against a Colts defense that he knows. And so, yeah, it was a hell of a week for him.
Yeah, him and the Titans overall. I mean, he had a great week. He's back up averaging that 5.2 yards per carry, which is really good. And that also allows Ryan Tannehill to go back to that game manager, protect the football style of play that he is good at, which we saw from him because he was 17 of 21, only 137 yards, but 2 touchdowns, no
No
interceptions.
interceptions.
Exactly. They protected the ball. They controlled the game clock, and Derrick Henry is looking like Derrick Henry of old. Like this Tennessee Titans overall, like they look this week like the team that won the AFC last season. They started out very slow at the beginning of this year, but they have been, trending in the right direction, and that's not to take away from the Colts because they've been doing the same. But yeah, Derrick Henry just went off this week, and he's definitely one of our winners in week 4.
Yeah, the dude was electric. But moving over to our first loser of the week, I have to give this to my Chicago Bears. Man, and to get beat the way that they got beat against the Giants, like I went into this week saying that the Bears, I don't have a lot of faith in. I don't think they're gonna win. I thought Saquon Barkley was gonna run all over them, and he did. 31 carries, 146 yards. But the more frustrating thing was Daniel Jones had 6 carries for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Giants just did the rollout. It completely worked for him. And my God, did it utterly piss me off that the Bears just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. And it
Eh,
wasn't just Daniel Jones. Tyrod Taylor was in there for a little while, and he rolled it out 3 times and ran for 30 yards as well total. So both quarterbacks were averaging over 10 yards per carry.
Yeah, and then the rollouts for Daniel Jones when he didn't run the ball, that's where most of his 8 completions came from. He wasn't really sitting in the pocket. Um, it was just, we're gonna fake the ball to Saquon. I'm
Yep.
gonna roll out, and then I'm gonna find an easy open target. The dude only got 71 passing yards, and the fact that the Bears could only muster up 12 points in that game, and Justin Fields looked better. He got sacked 6 times, which is still utterly frustrating. But for a team that they needed to have a good week this week, eh, it, yeah, it is. They are a loser for a second week in a row, and it is utterly frustrating to the point where it might become unwatchable for this team. Getting very close to.
Yeah, and this was a bad game, man. Like Justin Fields has nothing to go to out there. Like he's running the ball 7 times for 52 yards and like only 50% on his passes. Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet are the only targets he has that can consistently catch the balls that are thrown their way. All his other receivers just it's drops left and right. He doesn't have anybody else he can rely on, anyone else he can trust. And so that's where I think a lot of these sacks are coming from. He's scrambling so much trying to make something happen when he's got nothing to work with.
Yeah, so moving over to our second winner of this week, we have to give that one to the 1-3 Oakland Raiders. The fact that they were going up against a division rivalry team that is this rivalry is always a good one to watch. It is always very hard fought, and we've been saying that the Raiders, they just need to be able to finish, and they just haven't been able to do that. And the Raiders this week were able to finish. Like Derek Carr did exactly what he needed to do, but the Raiders did something that they've needed to do all year long, and that's rely on Josh Jacobs. Like that was so key for them this week, and they did it. Got 144 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He was an absolute dynamite, and they were better for it. And plus, he got 5 receptions for 31 yards. He was single-handedly able to beat the Broncos. And man, we're gonna be having a conversation about the Denver Broncos here soon. And
Well, we discussed it on Saturday when we were talking about this game because we talked about it at length, and we were trying to decide which team was going to play worse to lose the game rather than which team was going to play better to win. We discussed that Josh Jacobs was a fundamental part of that Raiders offense, but the Broncos are just so much inconsistency that it's hard to put any faith in them. And even the Raiders going forward, they managed to pull this one out, but Derek Carr is still really struggling to move the ball around very much. The vast majority of his completions and the yards gained are to Devontae Adams still. So
which
the
we
fact that
expected, though.
it is, but it makes it that much more difficult to win consistently. The
It
fact that they
does.
got Josh Jacobs involved and he got 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, that helps. He needs to keep doing that going forward because that's obviously what this team needs to be. They need to shift away from that West Coast always airing it out offense and start getting more to that run offense to really see some more consistency going forward.
Without a doubt. And moving forward to our second loser of the week, and this is a team that I feel like has made the list every single week,
Yep.
and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers, but more particularly for the second week in a row, Matt Canada. You know, I'm gonna let you take away for this one, obviously.
Well, I mean, it is. It's the play calling. It comes down to that every single week so far. And this week, we finally saw the quarterback switch that everybody's been talking about and everybody's been wanting. Halftime came around, and Mitchell Trubisky still wasn't getting anything going in this offense. And so they bring in Kenny Pickett. And so finally, we see them bring Kenny Pickett in this week after halftime. And he plays almost the same. Like there were some more flashes from Kenny Pickett, which was nice to see. He got George Pickens involved in the game a lot more. Um, but it just that play calling, it's not conducive to the type of talent that we have on this team. And Kenny Pickett, luckily, unlike Trubisky, he was going in there and he was making his reads and was able to get outside of the pocket and make some plays downfield still. Whereas Trubisky, a lot of times it was look to Deontay Johnson, look to his check down, and then try to run it up the gut for some unknown reason. But that being said, like the chances Kenny Pickett took in this Matt Canada offense were his 3 incompletions which all ended up as interceptions. Which if it was Mitchell Trubisky in there, he would have had those same opportunities, but Trubisky would have just taken the sack instead of throwing the interception. So we would have been no better off no matter which quarterback's in, which is unfortunate. Ultimately it comes down to this bad play calling that needs to change. I know this week the Steelers have a tough game against the Bills, and Mike Tomlin did announce today that Kenny Pickett is the starter going forward.
Which is honestly, you need to move forward. You can't be going flip flop back and forth between who's the starter and who's not the starter. But yeah, obviously Trubisky, he's unwilling to take chances this year, and you see that because when he was in, he got sacked 3 times for a loss of 26 yards. And Kenny Pickett, granted, he did have the interceptions, but this was his first half of true NFL football. He
Mm-hmm.
got 0 sacks, and you know, was it glorious? No. Was it upsetting and frustrating? Yeah. But it is now there is no hiding for Matt Canada. He can't
No,
sit back and go, oh, it's Trubisky. Oh, it's Trubisky.
like
And if
last year when he was going, oh, it's Roethlisberger. Oh, it's Roethlisberger. Yeah.
exactly, it's one of those things where it's like, all right, we brought in this quarterback in Kenny Pickett, who is exactly what Matt Canada needs
He
from
was
the
the
quarterback.
exact guy that Matt Canada said he wanted.
Mhm.
Matt Canada said he wanted Kenny Pickett for this offense. And
And
so
if he
now he's
can't
got
make
it.
it work, then we have to listen to what Snoop Dogg says and
Yep.
fire that bum.
And honestly, this is a good time to make that switch because we'll have, I believe, 3 weeks to test this out. If they go barely able to score 20 points each week and lose all 3 of these games, then during the bye week, Mike Tomlin has to make that change and he has to fire Matt Canada and we have to bring somebody else in. It's that simple.
Exactly. Yeah. But moving over to our final winner of this week, we are taking a look here at the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, there's a lot to look at throughout this entire week. You know, Kansas City coming off of a loss to the Indianapolis Colts where they just beat themselves. And then they're going up against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, granted, they had a lot of, rough situations going on in Tampa Bay with Hurricane Ian and that kind of stuff, all being surrounded, this, that, and the other thing. But the last time these two teams faced off in Tampa Bay against each other, the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl in what was just spectacular fashion. So it was kind of a revenge game of the Indianapolis Colts and of that Super Bowl. And my God, did the Chiefs just look unstoppable. Like Patrick Mahomes, that one play where he spun around and got that, threw the ball to Clyde Edwards-Helaire for a touchdown. You're just sitting back going like
It's like
man,
he's
can
playing
you
backyard football.
it is. It's like he's playing backyard football. He has tackling set to 0 for the AI on the opposite team.
Yeah.
It's just not fair.
Yeah, it's like Thanksgiving Day, dad's playing football with all the fucking 12-year-olds and he's just destroying them. That's what it really felt like and looked like watching him out there. And yeah, you could tell he had something to prove that game because he was out there and he was just dialing it up every play, every down.
Yeah, and it's not like Tom Brady didn't go out there and have himself a game. Like the dude threw at 45 years old, 52 passes, completed 39 of them, got 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and was sacked once. It's like Tom Brady was still on point, and the Chiefs, they just did everything right that game. They
Well,
could
what
do no wrong.
well what they did is they shut down the run game. It was all Tom Brady because that's all they had. Leonard Fournette only had
Minus
3
3
carries
yards.
for -3 yards.
Which in today's league, like
Right?
how like you should be able to get 3 yards by sneezing and just like, "Oh shit, I tripped."
Right, exactly. And so ultimately, like that's what really hurt them was they weren't able to get that run game going early in the game like the Chiefs were able to. And so then they were playing from behind all game, which meant Tom Brady's passing it.
Yeah. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's not exactly what you want. But moving over to our final loser of this week, it has to be the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
Has to, you
Miami
know,
Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa as well. I mean, I feel so bad for the guy. We talked about it last week after that that game when he took that bad shot to the back and the neck, and there was questions of does he have a concussion? What's going on? Why was he back out there? Did he go through the protocol properly? And then this week out there against the Bengals, and he got slammed down hard again, and that was a scary sight for sure. Like you could tell right away that he was not right.
well, yeah, you could just simply see from his hands, like they were just contorting in like just this sick, twisted way, and you knew it wasn't right. And obviously, the doctor who cleared Tua in that Bills game, I think they ultimately ended up firing him because of protocol breach. But like, you just feel bad for the Miami Dolphins because again, this was a team that we looked at and said they are easily one of the number one teams in the NFL. And you know what? Granted, do you want to go up against what you could consider the Cincinnati Bengals in an AFC rival for, if not a wild card position for potentially moving forward in the playoffs? Yeah, you want that. It's a primetime game. But if you have a quarterback who just got his bell rung, sometimes you need to pull the player back and go, yes, you think you are all right, but we need to protect you from yourself. And you know what? They ultimately ended up losing against the Bengals. Sure. But the bigger loss there is Tua is out for an unknown amount of time. Hopefully he gets back out there. But yeah, if I'm the Miami Dolphins, I'm a little bit worried right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean firing that doctor's all well and good, but too little, too late at that point. And the Miami Dolphins are, once again going to be back under that microscope and under investigation, because the NFLPA is launching an investigation into this to see how and why this was missed in week 3 and allowed to go forward in week 4, to the point where, like concussions like this, sometimes guys can't come back from it.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. We might not see Tua on the field again because of this, depending on the extent of the lingering effects, the headaches, the neck pain, any number of things. Like we've discussed it at length in the past. Guys like Antonio Brown, who, while they were wild guys, they were still flying the straight and narrow. And then after a few concussions, they became just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
CTE is a real thing.
Well, even just from my own experience with concussions, that took me away from my career as a boxer. And so, it's not something to play with. It's not something to mess around with. But yeah. So moving forward into our Thursday night game prediction, where we see,
The Denver Broncos are hosting the Indianapolis Colts this week on Thursday night.
yes, and this is a really, really interesting matchup. Not one that I'm too thrilled about. Like, I'm kind of getting tired of seeing some of these really shit games on primetime TV, because the Denver Broncos, yes, they're 2-2, but they're kind of like my Chicago Bears, where, yeah, they've won 2 games, but should they really be proud of those 2 games that they won? Not really. And the Indianapolis Colts, obviously, when they beat the Chiefs, that was a big momentum thing for them. They just ran into who we talked about earlier in Derrick Henry. So this is going to be a tough matchup.
This is for sure. The thing I'll say is the Denver Broncos have been very consistent in the fact that they're extremely inconsistent. Like you can't tell what sort of team is going to be out there week to week, let alone drive to drive.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to predict what this Denver Broncos team is, personality wise, and what they're going to be able to do. Whereas, at least with the Colts, as far as I've seen, they started off really slow. They had that really awkward tie against the Texans, they and then they lost their week 2 game, but then they were able to beat the Colts last week, you know,
Chiefs.
or the Chiefs, yeah. And then they were able to beat the Chiefs, and then that game against the Titans, that's always a tough game. You know, the thing I'll say about them is they've been trending in the right direction. They've got a new quarterback in Matt Ryan, and every week the team has looked better and more of a cohesive unit, to the point where I have more confidence in the Colts to be able to go into Denver and pull out a win than I have in the Broncos being able to have a win at home.
Yeah, for me right now, I'm gonna have to kind of agree with you on that, because obviously the Broncos are just so inconsistent, and I think that has to do with coaching without a doubt. But this is gonna be, yeah, this is gonna be one of those games.
Yeah, and I mean what we've seen is that the Colts so far, they have struggled within their own division, but outside of their division, they've beaten the Chiefs.
Yep. Yes.
And so if we're looking at that, then if he can beat the Chiefs, he can beat the Broncos.
I agree. But that is all we have for today. We'd like to tell you all, if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe, because that will really help us out. If you have any suggestions for future video ideas that you would like to see from us, please let us know down in that comment section. But thank you all for coming by. Peace.